a month ago, the supreme leader of the Taliban had said, girls will not go to school ever. It was a shock for me, because that means that approximately 10 to 11 million girls are now not going to return to school for who knows how long.
Sara Wahedi is an Afghan-Canadian tech entrepreneur and humanitarian. Sara is the founder of Ehtesab, which built the Ehtesab app, Afghanistan's first civic technology platform, that over 4 years the app sent more than 250,000 real-time alerts across the country, informing citizens of security incidents. She is the CEO of Civaam, a civic tech startup focused on building innovative technological solutions for crisis regions, designed and developed by local technologists. Sara previously interned with Apple with a team of artificial intelligence and machine learning on projects focused on user-centered design. Sara's commitment to leveraging technology for social impact has earned her numerous recognitions, including Time Magazine's MIT, and in 2023, she was also recognized as One Young World's Entrepreneur of the Year. I'm Candela Yatche, and today's conversation resonates deeply with me, because like Sara, I believe in technology's power to catalyze lasting social change. Welcome to a new episode of the Oxford Policy Pod. Okay, so welcome.
Thank you very much, Candela.
I'm so happy to having you.
Thank you.
And I want to know how you start after working in Apple, being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was one moment where you realized in 2018 after an attack in Kabul, and I want to take you back at that moment and know where what they were your thoughts, your feelings, and what drives you to be an entrepreneur.
So Apple was a full circle moment for me. I started interning there in 2022. And 2018 was really where it started. And I think Apple was, in terms of reaching this corporate behemoth where AI and machine learning was is still being led, and so many innovative products are being built. In 2018, I had no idea that I was going to be in technology. I was working in refugee policy in Afghanistan for the president's office. And I was certain that my work and my career would be just refugee policy for the rest of my life. I really believed that. And just emerging markets and working with institutions like the World Bank. That was my passion. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs can agree, probably yourself as well, that there's really this split-second moment when you realize that there is this one instance that changes your life. And for me, that was this explosion in Kabul, just a few feet from my home. And everything feels like a blur from then. So there's this explosion, and my friend who was at the U.S. Embassy messaged me and said, Sara, there is an explosion near your home. It's ISIS. They're attacking the Indian visa office. Do you know this? And I said, no, I'm literally watching it with my eyes. How do you know that? I mean, you're so far away. And she said that the U.S. Embassy sends us these alerts, and I know that you live there. She came to my home for tea many times. And I asked her, I said, can I share this with my family? Can I share this with my friends? And she said, I don't think so, because this is a private service for people who work in these embassies, in these companies, and I don't think I'm allowed to share it with you. And that was my light bulb moment, because I thought, how is this incredibly important tool that keeps people safe not available for local citizens? And from there, from 2018, from that moment, I spent the next, what's been almost a decade of my life, just incredibly passionate about this fundamental human right entrenched under the UN Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19, to access to information. And a lot of people forget that it is a fundamental human right. The 911 systems, or 119, wherever you are in the world, that is a human right. And for me, my whole life changed. I still deeply care about refugee policy. I work and collaborate with UNHCR a lot. Of course, a big component of my work is tech and refugee spaces now. But for me, it completely shifted in one day, and I became obsessed with what is this platform going to look like? How could I build something very similar for Afghans, and not just Afghans, but people across the world? So for me, entrepreneurship feels like my child. When I first built Ehtesab, it really was my baby. And how I can say that is when you have a child, it's unconditional love. For me, Ehtesab and the app was unconditional because I was not getting paid for it. It was costing me a lot of money to run it. But I knew that the impact was so important. And entrepreneurship is, I would honestly define it as an unconditional passion for something that perhaps in the very beginning you don't think is going to make you money. And it actually might just be long-term impact that might not make, your shareholders rich, but in the local context has a profound impact.
And you were saying this related with entrepreneur, like this first project was my child. What makes you stop working there and start another like in this case Civaam? Like I want to know that path.
Yeah. So Ehtesab, after Afghanistan collapses in August 2021, the app that I just told you about, the US Embassy app and similar apps that were in Afghanistan, they all shut down when Afghanistan collapsed. And suddenly our startup, which the average age of our team was 22, 23, we are now the sole information providers in Afghanistan. And we took on that responsibility from August 2021. Afghanistan collapses, and across the world, people are messaging us. Countries, embassies, agencies, companies, how can we get people out? How can I get alerts from your service? I need more information about my family, my friends. And from the day the Taliban arrived in Afghanistan on August 15th, 2021, we ran that app amidst people in our team getting arrested, office raids, attacks on me on social media. And we ran that up until last year. November 2024 was when we officially shut down. And the reason for that was the Taliban had made it impossible for us to run the app. Our team did not feel safe. We had team members who left. I'd say half of our team members are now across the world pursuing amazing jobs. One of our amazing women leaders in the team at Ehtesab is now doing a brilliant, data scientist role in the United States, and so many of them are leading really amazing roles in technology across the world. But that's just to say that half of the other team said, no, we're not going to leave. We want to stay, and I need you to make it safer for me to live in my own country. So I had to make the difficult decision as someone who had founded this idea to say that if I cannot keep my team safe, I have to shut it down. And it was incredibly difficult because I still get messages from people across the world who say, why is the app shut down? It's important for me to get services. We have so many Afghan women in Afghanistan who have said to us, can we please have the app back so we can send in reports? But I cannot promise anyone safety. And that was the most heartbreaking thing for me, was that technology can only do so much. If the team is getting harassed and stalked every day, I have a responsibility as a founder to say no. So that was a difficult decision for me in the end. It was, I can't keep my team safe. And unfortunately, we had to officially shut down, just to also give the Taliban, the public notice that we are no longer in service. And from then, I was able to transition to Civaam, which allows me to do the same type of work, but without the Taliban harassing our team members. So we've completely shifted everything between New York and Oxford now for Civaam. And we don't just work in the Afghan context, we work in the global context. But that idea of that child, that idea of equitable, democratic access to important technology that saves lives, that keeps people informed, is something that should be scaled across the world. So that's really the mission that we have now.
Wow. I feel I identify with you. Sometimes we have a lot of responsibility as founders, and I can't imagine how hard it was to take that decision for you. So really interesting to think like how you drive and you transform your motivation, but you canalize now with another name, but with the same passion.
Exactly.
And the mission, no, that it's to help people and to have that impact.
Yeah.
I know that in Civaam there is a mantra that the technology is created by local technologies, like it's developed by local technologists. I want to know why you choose that model and not other one.
That's a great question, Candela. The reason why I decided to go with this approach was I've worked, and I'm sure you have in the Argentinian context, I've worked with many experts who come from New York City, who come from London, who don't live in the countries that we come from, who don't live in the communities that we live in, and are consultants with a huge budget, building technology, building innovation, or who take on consulting. And they don't live in these places, and they never will. And I found that in the last 6 to 7 years of doing consulting for these larger firms or for UN agencies, that if the technology or the innovation isn't built, really, I would not even call it co-building. I would say even led by people who live in these communities, it's not going to stay. The technology is not going to be sustainable because you're hiring local individuals as consultants, even though it's their community. And I made a promise to myself that if I were to ever pursue a similar model like Deloitte or any of these consulting firms, that I would not be reliant on foreign Oxbridge Ivy League consultants. It would be, how can I find the best talent in these communities? And if they're perhaps maybe they have a gap in some of their expertise, maybe whether it's data analysis or now using AI, how can we supplement that? How can we maneuver that and provide them courses or whatever they need to be able to do the work themselves? So for me, it's not how do I find the perfect candidate to do the work? It's how can I find the perfect candidate who lives here? And if there's a gap, how can I support them in getting the skills that they need to build it? Because in Ehtesab, in the context of Afghanistan, and even with Civaam in our projects, I find that when you when you bring on a community and you say, this is your project, and we're here to support you to build it, they will take on that project with a very low overhead and low cost and say, I built this, so I feel responsible. But if you as a foreign consultant build it, they're not going to feel like, they want to take this on. They're going to say, you paid my money, and now I don't want to work on it anymore. So that was really the mantra that we had taken on for Civaam. And even now, at Oxford here at the Blavatnik, we had an amazing woman from an African country. I'm not going to name the name for her privacy, but she had said that in her country, the IMF brought this young new grad with no experience to her country and said, okay, we want you to completely work on the finance policy of our entire nation. And she said, why not bring the best of the IMF? Why is it the intern? Why is it this young guy? Why don't we have the same value as if the IMF were to work with, China or in the United States or any European country? Why is it that our countries are seen as not as valuable or not as important? And that's what I wanted to shift, was that amazing talent comes from, fragile contexts like Afghanistan. And the goal is to find them and to mentor them. And that's the work that I've taken on.
That's lovely. I think that when you're going to implement in other country that it's not yours, all looks like easier because you don't know the complexities of that country.
Right.
So it's really important to value that local voices and all the insights that they can have, apart from the expertise, but all the local insights of the culture, social interactions. I want to know, because you work in crisis context, how do you prioritize, like, okay, I will develop a technology for this issue or this issue? How, like, do you have any tactic that you use at the time of prioritizing?
No, I'd say it's really the way that we prioritize the projects is probably the most emergent situation. So whatever is urgent, we put that first. So for example, right now, my main focus with Civaam has been Number one, healthcare and gender-based violence support for Afghan women. And the second one is education. And the reason for that is with gender-based violence, the Taliban had in December 2023 banned women's shelters. So they said any women's shelter must now be closed. And what they've done is they have taken women who require emergency services like shelter space, and they've shifted them to prisons. And what's happening is there's been so many reports of rape in these prisons. So there's women who are experiencing cyclical trauma in Afghanistan. And the Taliban, because they're a de facto authority, the UN and a lot of their agencies just don't know how to deal with this crisis. So that's where technology can support, because our work, in the most safest way that I can say without giving too much information, is trying to understand the situation and say, how could technology perhaps supplement something that the UN is doing or these agencies are doing so we can circumvent the security issue but keep women safe? So how do we use technology but also local community context to help women? So my work isn't just, a phone or a laptop can change the world. It's how does this tool support change on the ground? So the most urgent issue for us was healthcare in Afghanistan and gender-based violence case management. And the third one, which I'm working on now, which is taking up most of my time, is education. And the reason, again, for education is because it became so urgent. So a month ago, the supreme leader of the Taliban had said, girls will not go to school ever. And that was shocking for me because in the media, we haven't heard anything about Afghanistan for so long. And to see that in his law, like written down he posted it on X, was a shock for me, because that means that approximately 10 to 11 million girls are now not going to return to school for who knows how long. So now we're working at Civaam on, again, a mixture of online and offline methods to provide secret schools in Afghanistan. And that's the project that's taking up most of my time. So it's really the things in the headlines in the news that we realize, okay, oh my gosh, this requires emergency support. And that's how I kind of figure out what we're going to work on next.
What an amazing project. Like education, it's transformative, no?
Mhm.
And I remember in Argentina, to be honest, we don't have like too much information about Afghanistan, but I remember when perhaps we have information when the Taliban's like put strict norms, and we like receive that data, and it's like perhaps it's so far from our context, and that it's difficult to imagine the impact that all that measures has. For example, not going alone to places,
Right.
Education,
Not reading a book in public.
not reading a book in public.
Yeah, that was a new one.
Wow. Related with this, for example, reading a book, education, it's information. I want to know, since Talibans are in Afghanistan, how has changed the access to the information and also misinformation, and how people can recognize that and understand, okay, this is true, this not. If there are banning people, journalists, activists.
That's a great question. The Taliban is quite complicated. I'd say right now, in terms of their regime, they're focusing a lot on silencing. That's their thing. Arresting, detaining. Those are the two tools that they use to silence people. So every month you'll hear about an education activist being imprisoned. You'll hear about women being imprisoned. You'll hear about young Afghan TikTokers or Instagram influencers being arrested. So for the Taliban, disinformation and misinformation is not a tool that they use. I think that they primarily have stuck to their old regime the first time they were in power, that silencing and arresting and threatening Afghans to follow their laws is more powerful than for them to strategically shift people's mindsets or to trick them or to believe into something else, because they have so much power. They don't need to implement misinformation or disinformation where we see in the Western context, in like elections, for example, because you have different power players. But in Afghanistan, the Taliban has full power. They don't need to change people's mindsets. They say either you listen to us or we'll arrest you. And for my work, the goal is more about bringing in and exposing a lot of these laws and to tell people that, look, things are not going to change. So I'd say in terms of disinformation, perhaps what the Taliban did really well was they tricked the world. They said to them, oh, girls will go back to school. We're just reviewing the curriculum. Girls will go back into an Islamic version of education. They'll go back in a few months. And a few months became 3 years. So they were very strategic in terms of tricking the world, saying, oh, for sure, girls will go back. But they didn't. And now they're so confident, they're officially saying, no, girls will not return to school for the indefinite future. So their strategy is mainly, how do we trick the international community? But internally, their power is so strong that if someone even speaks out, I mean, there's a recent TikToker that was arrested who in Afghanistan was speaking out against the Taliban, and he was recently arrested. So they don't try to shift people's narratives. They just say, okay, if you're going to speak out against us, we're going to arrest you. And that's how they have so much power.
And what about Afghans that are outside the country? Like, do you think that social media platforms help them like to speak out?
Yeah.
Or how do you see this? Because I was thinking that at the moment that Taliban's like start like taking power in Afghanistan, like a couple years ago, which year was?
It was August 2021.
2021.
Yeah.
Okay, at that moment, I listened a lot of Afghan women, for example, like spreading a lot of information. And for example, I'm a feminist, so for me it was really important to listen and to share what they were saying.
Yeah.
But I want to know if social media platforms helps only Afghans outside the country, because inside perhaps is a threat.
Yeah. I mean, technology, this is why it's so incredibly important, because even in the very beginning, there was Afghan women who are protesting, taking videos, singing underneath their hijabs to protest. And technology was and continues to be a big component of how we share these stories. So, for example, myself, on Twitter, on X, or on Instagram, sometimes I share stories and letters that I get from Afghan women and girls in the country who say, please share my story with the world. And I do that quite frequently. So technology has played a huge integral role in that. And the main goal for me has been, elevating the voices of these women. But in terms of the diaspora, I think similar, and I'm sure that you've worked on this in terms of women's self-esteem and just how quickly the media moves on from different issues. The attention span we have to focus on Afghanistan is decreasing quite quickly. When the Taliban came into power in August 2021, it's almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years in August. And you can see that the international community is focusing less on Afghanistan. In August 2021, 2022, when a new decree came out, a new law came out by the Taliban, the press will really, and the media will focus on it. But we're seeing less and less interest in Afghanistan, and that's had a lot of impact on how the diaspora is able to share information. So even for me, I've noticed that when I'm sharing updates on Afghan women, whether it's new decrees or laws, people feel exhausted from Afghanistan. I get that a lot from in comments or messages saying, Sarah, I care about Afghan women, but it's just so much now. It feels like we can't really do anything because it's such a huge issue. It's a complete erasure of an entire gender. And how do you approach that? So what I try to do is I try to be quite strategic with the messaging, and I think the diaspora needs to do more of that as well. That we're not overwhelming people to say, oh my gosh, this is hell on earth, we can't change anything, but to say, okay, there are a couple of girls here who have sent in letters. They want to continue their education. Could we start a scholarship, or can we speak to some universities across the world who can support them? And, there are some schools in Latin and South America that provide scholarships for Afghan girls and refugees. So there are different things that I try to focus on a very specific context that I can raise awareness on, but also to give people a sense of hope. I think when you're overwhelming audiences with stories that feel hopeless, you get exhaustion. So I've become more strategic, and the diaspora, I think, still struggles with that, where we think that the trauma porn, for example, where we share the really horrific stories, are going to get more attention than they will. But I think it leads to a lot of passiveness, and people just feel like, what can I do? So I'm quite strategic with the messaging that I try to put out there on Afghan women and girls.
So in some ways, do you think that to gain international attention, it's important to adapt these stories in some way? And I want to ask you, do you think that there are other actions for people that are listening to this that we can contribute, being abroad, but trying to help and generate impact there?
Yeah, of course. In terms of your first point, I focus more. I found that it's more impactful for audiences to hear someone's name. Like if I talk about Candela, if I talk about Sara, people feel like it's someone that they can know. If I write, 100% of women are not able to go to school, or, if this percent of the population is, going through this, statistics and numbers don't make you feel.
Are more cold.
It feels cold.
Yeah.
But if I say, a girl named Sara is 16 years old and she wanted to be a pilot and she can't, it makes you feel like it could be someone that you know, and it humanizes her. It humanizes her story. So that's the way that I have approached sharing the stories. When I get a letter, when I get an email, I try to humanize, and I try to share that person and provide maybe a first person point of view, so people can feel like, oh my gosh, maybe she's sitting in front of me and I'm hearing what she's saying to me. So I do a lot of direct quotes. I try to share, screenshots of their actual text messages, because it feels like it's something that you could receive in your own phone. And I think that that's really the way that I've been able to perhaps connect with the audience and the individuals who have joined our community, is humanizing those stories. And I try to do that more strategically as time passes. Because like I said, if you're not figuring out a way to humanize and try to create the way that people can empathize, people feel quite exhausted from the story. So I'm always putting the women and girls at the forefront of every story.
And how do you balance this, amplifying single stories and trying not to over generalize in some ways what all Afghan women are living nowadays?
Like I said, one is I try not to post or to share too much information every single day. Like I said, it can be quite draining. But I also try to follow the journey of one girl. For example, there was a girl named Sahar. She's a recent computer engineering grad. And I shared her story from the first letter that I ever got from her, to a job that she found in secret, to her own initiative that she's leading of Afghan engineers in hiding in Afghanistan, and trying to give people across the world updates about her so they can feel like they can empathize with her. But I don't want to exhaust people. So like I said, I'm trying to be very careful about that, but also making sure that I'm not evoking the messaging in a way that they are suffering or that they are weak. It's to show that the thing that is the issue is a systemic misogynistic regime that wants to erase Afghan women. But it's not that the women are weak or unable. It is the fact that the international community and a lot of Afghan men have allowed this to perpetuate. So it's to put the women front and center and to show the amazing work that they've been doing and the skills that they have, but to say that this is, again, diplomacy and misogyny and so many things that have perpetuated this issue, this disaster. But to put women at the forefront as warriors, as these change makers, and sharing amazing stories of their underground schools, of underground salons, cafes, book clubs. And right now, there's an Afghan woman this week who shared a post with me, and she said, Sara, we're having an underground book club. And we want to share with other Afghan women across the world if they want to join us. So regardless of all these restrictions, Afghan women are showing up. They're doing amazing work. And my job is to support that, to figure out, how can we create connections? How can we maybe send some books to them? How can we scale the work that they're doing? But not to speak for them, but to support the narratives that they want to reach out into the world.
I like this idea of supporting what they really want and not giving like the solutions designed by us that we are outside. I like it very much. And what do you think, or what does represent for you the feminist tech policy in practice?
For me, it's a great question because it's something that I think we also struggle with in the Western context, or just in our local communities. But for me, especially in terms of crisis regions, it's to put the experiences of women at the forefront when it comes to designing technology, when it comes to utilizing technology, testing it, deploying it, having women lead. And if it's taking me more time, if I need to find more women to lead, I will do that, even if it means delaying a project. Because even though, I know that a lot of people find discomfort with saying, well, if you have amazing male colleagues, why not let them do this? And, I'm sure that they are feminist by nature. But I find that, for example, in Afghanistan, it is a fully women-led team, fully. And like I said, although perhaps there's some skills that require some support, I'm more than happy to lead that. But I found that a recent project we had with this gender-based violence case management support, having a fully women-led team was just so amazing in terms of the designing and the testing and the prototyping. The way that women were finding faults and mistakes in the designs that our male colleagues had created and saying, oh, as a woman, I can promise you this is not going to work. So they were the ones who were actually innovating. And that's why even in any other project or context, I'm always saying in those communities, find the women. Find the women, even if they feel like, oh, we don't feel equipped, we don't feel like we have the skills, we'll get you the skills. But women-led innovation is something that I think we need to really lean in on. And it is radical, it is feminist, but I think it should be supported. And I think women founders should feel more comfortable in leading feminist-led technology. And I think that it actually has shown brilliant outcomes. For us, like I said, it completely changed the model of our healthcare platform. And I want to continue that because feminist-led policy and feminist-led technology is completely different than the male-centered that we have. I mean, right now, we had a recent report. I got an email recently that nudify apps, where these AI generated platforms are able to take any video, any photo, and basically present a woman naked or in really horrific positions or situations or contexts. These permeate because of a lot of biases that are entrenched against women. But if that was a feminist-led policy or framework, that would never have happened. And I think that instead of us as women responding to misogynistic technology that hurts women, that puts their lives in danger, and saying, oh, okay, these big tech companies are going to create a band of women in a board or an advisory context. Why is it always after? Like after a horrific thing happens in technology, we're creating a women-led group. Have women design from the very beginning. Have them be a part of the conversation. And I don't think that we'll have the horrific misogynistic issues that we have today in technology.
Lots of things to think about that. Like why still now there is a lot of resistance of including in the decision-making process, in the design process. So really interesting. I was wondering to know because you like under an authoritarian regime, like you believe that digital tools can create or promote in some way accountability. I want to know more about that. Like, what is your vision there?
So in terms of Afghanistan, I found that when Ehtesab was still running, when the application was still live, when you provide a tool for local citizens to say, If you see something, report it. If you want to say something, write it down. You find a community that feels more responsibility in change making in their local context, because you give them a tool to share their grievances, to share their issues, to protest. When you take that away from them and you take away those tools to protest or to share their sentiments, they feel helpless, that they can't do anything. And I think with the Ehtesab tool, when the Taliban first came into power, we had so many individuals sending us questions like, what's going to happen next? How do I find out information about girls' schools? Is my daughter's school going to be open again? People were sending us reports. But now, without Ehtesab, and from what I know, there is no application that exists like Ehtesab in Afghanistan anymore. There's nothing like that. You really do start to believe that you are in a regime and you must accept everything that happens there. So digital tools, in any context, it can be Afghanistan, it can be in anywhere around the world. It is a tool in your hand that feels accessible, where you can protest, you can write your issues. And it's not just like Facebook. It's not like when you're writing a tweet or you're posting something on Instagram. It's specifically made to be a government tool. It's specifically made to be a citizen-led tool, different from social media. I think it's important for us to know the position for social media to be a tool to engage and to connect, but why civic technology is important on its own, because it's not meant to be a social media tool with ads and to keep you online or to share your story. It's specifically meant for community building. And that's why I feel so passionate about it, because I think that there's a very special place for that kind of technology. And for the Afghan context, I think what I've seen is that when you take away that ability to report or to send in the issues that are important to you, you feel like you can't make a change. And that's why it's incredibly important for technologists. And I hope the one message they get from this is to build and to really figure out in your communities what tools exist for people in your community to send in reports on the issues that are important to them. And if they don't have it, is the government doing enough? So I hope that with AI, it'll facilitate the development of tools like Ehtesab, but cheaper and faster, instead of, the way that it took us months, maybe even like a year, because we didn't have the same capacity that we have with AI in 2025.
There's something related with brain drain also. Like in 2021, a lot of Afghans moved from Afghanistan. So how you see that, if there's any impact on the development of solutions? Because you want local people inside the teams, but perhaps a lot of people with a lot of tools are outside. So how have you managed that?
So when Afghanistan collapses, we do have a huge brain drain, but I'd say it was the VIPs and the elites that we saw a big brain drain. In terms of the, we say, for example, in public policy that, you have your leaders and then you have the technocrats. You have the people who work within the ministries and the people who work within the agencies. These are the people that never left. Their leaders changed. So perhaps it was like a Western-backed government and now the Taliban are in power. But the people who are in the offices, the people who work in these administrations, they're all the same. So we didn't experience the brain drain to that level at the technocratic level. But we had a huge brain drain, for example, women. So in Afghanistan, we had 300 to 400, if I can remember correctly, women judges, Supreme Court judges within the national and the provincial level, who all escaped, except for a few that were assassinated. So that brain drain was incredibly horrific for Afghan women, because suddenly you have the legal spectrum that has now eradicated women. So there are no women judges left in Afghanistan. But in terms of the brain drain for technology, there are still so many technologists working in Afghanistan. Like I said, maybe the skill set was impacted, but with technology, with YouTube, with free courses, a lot of those young technologists have been able to teach themselves. So a lot of the women that work within our team are women who have learned a lot of coding or their technical background through free courses like edX or Harvard X or Columbia X. There are these courses that they take for free and watch these videos and learn. So in terms of technology, what we've been lucky with is that incredibly passionate Afghans will learn themselves. So that really didn't impact us at the technology level.
I want to know if you have a young woman in front of you that is working with technology to generate social impact. Which kind of advice would you give her?
That's a great question. I would start with whatever you end up doing, make sure that it makes you excited to do the work that you want to do. Don't feel the need to approach everything with, I want to find the solution. I want to make change in my country. I want to change something. That's great. We all have that. We all have a passion to bring change in our communities. But does it make you excited to wake up in the morning? There are many times where my work got to the point where I felt so much anxiety and so much stress that I was taking on too much. And my passion, where I was excited to wake up every day, I was working until the evening, that was going away. So for me, it's always important that whatever I work on makes me happy and makes me excited. And it doesn't feel like work. That's another thing. Does it feel like work? Does it feel like, exhausting to you? Because Afghanistan is already so stressful. And I would not want a young woman or a young girl to put more stress on herself that doesn't feel like an escape. I feel like in Afghanistan, and a lot of the young women that I've spoken to, they say like a book is an escape for me. A movie is an escape. Sitting with my sisters and my friends quietly in our garden is an escape. That's the only way you can really survive mentally in Afghanistan, is that the little things in our life that we take for granted, whether it's a walk in the park, whether it's, having our hair in the sun, or, wearing whatever we want to wear, laughing in public. These are privileges that we take for granted, but for Afghan women, that's an escape. There was a report by Roshana Media and The Guardian that was in the news today or yesterday about fathers saying that I control my daughter at home. I tell her, before you leave, don't laugh, don't smile, don't do anything. And you can see even at home, these girls are restricted. So my advice would be, make sure that whatever you do makes you really, truly happy, makes you feel like it's an escape, and find your community. Like with technology, DM your favorite, influence. Like, for example, if it's women's bodies, like, DM Candela, email her, find the people that you see in the world that are leading the work that you're doing and say, I'm in Afghanistan and I really would love your guidance. And to be honest, I'm not sure about you, but for me, whenever I get these emails from these young women, I do take the time. Even if I'm having a busy day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you emailed me. I feel so proud of you that you took, because it's anxiety driving. I remember when I was younger and I was emailing my mentors and my heroes and saying, my name is Sara. I look up to you. I've read your book or I've watched your podcast. That takes a lot of strength. So I always take the time and say, oh my gosh, it's amazing that you reached out. Let me see if I can help you. And anyway, so I'd say also email your heroes, reach out to them, ask them questions, and constantly learn and like debrief with yourself. Keep a journal, record your learning process, but let it feel like it's fun would be the main thing.
Beautiful. I want to know how you manage your own safety doing a high risk job, because you have a lot of exposure. And I want to know the significance of being an Afghan woman speaking across the world and in public spaces and representing a lot of values that are against from the Taliban.
Well, it's draining, and I'd love to hear about your experience in this as well. We come from very different cultural contexts, but I think women leading is something that we can all empathize with. For me, from the very beginning, before Ehtesab even when it kind of went viral across the world, it was a good about 2 years where no one knew what it was. It was just, something that we created and we were really proud of it as a team. But once it went viral and it was in Time and Forbes and CNN and all these different platforms, I felt the pressure early on. My messages went from being almost all positive and very work related to comments about my face or where I'm from, or, she has an American accent. Is she actually Afghan? It felt really exhausting for me because it went from sharing just very technical updates about my work because my community and my audience was so small, to people who were seeing these viral posts and following, and it became quite anxiety driving for me. So once I was sharing more posts about, women's stories and women who felt felt comfortable sharing with me, and I was sharing these things or speaking out against, these male communities that were quite misogynistic, or the Taliban, I was getting death threats. I remember when I first moved to Oxford, I had a man who was literally stalking me, and he had posted and said, I'm on High Street, I'm here. And, this really terrifying moment that, if I stand up, I have to also expect that, people will say death threats. And this is something that many Afghan women have experienced. I'd say most, if not all, of the women that I know that have a public profile have experienced death threats, or have been stalked, or have been harassed online. And I think once you gain a larger platform, people dehumanize you. They think that you're just a caricature or like a little character on the screen, and that you're not real. And then sometimes I've met people who I've realized have bullied me online, and I've met them in person, and they just don't have the confidence to say it in person. They go, "Oh yes, hi, I know who you are," and then they humanize you because they see you in person. But it's incredibly exhausting, and I think that although we've made a lot of strides and improvements with women and women leaders, it is still so easy to push down women than it is to men. And I think that this space can be lonely, and there are still very few protections for women online. Like, I think that the larger social media companies still are not doing enough to keep women safe. But for me, having a small circle, a good community, not posting where I am, my actual location. So I do put in the security mechanisms, but I'd say it is still something that I do deal with, unfortunately.
In Argentina, it's similar, like women in governments, women in the public, like in social media or in traditional media, being a journalist, like there is a lot of digital violence against women in general, and it's really hard to cope with that. And I agree that there are not too much measures to protect like physical and mental health to women that are with this exposure. And like, I want to know, to close this, I love this conversation, and I can stay here for longer. But the people in the studio wanna kill us. Like, I want to know, how do you see the future of Afghan women, and also how do you see the future of technology, and how technology can impact in a positive way?
I'm glad you chose that as your final question, Candela, because the one thing that I've been trying to focus on more is, how do we shift this idea of crisis regions, of fragile context, and to shift it from, oh, okay, we're having our global AI summit or global tech summit, and oh, we have some people from the global south here. Okay, like, let's just include them because we have to. That really needs to change. I think it's incredibly problematic. I think it's lazy. I think it's immoral, because a lot of the technology that we're seeing right now in terms of AI is being tested on Black bodies, on bodies in the global south. And there are few protections, almost no protections for people, for example, who build the technology, test the technology, build the AI that we're working on. And we really need to stop treating fragile contexts like a playing ground for our technology, whether it's in warfare, whether it's building new AI. And I would really urge specifically your listeners who perhaps have come from, fragile contexts, to build communities, to build unions, to build, awareness campaigns that if you're going to come here, bring your technology, we want protection, we want laws, we want regulation, because the international community is not going to do that on its own. Other than the few people who really care about the morality, why would they ever say, oh, we care about, the global majority? They don't. So it's up to us. It's up to us who come from all these different, non-Western contexts to say, AI and these new emerging technologies is the future, we are going to set the game. We're going to set the narrative. You're not going to come and tell us what to do or how you want to use our bodies and our minds and our expertise. We are going to be toe-to-toe with you. We're going to be, partner to partner rather than someone that you come and you that we're submissive or that, you can use us. So I'd say the future, I hope, is one that is more equitable, that includes voices at the governing level, not at the consulting level. And like the brilliant question you asked about feminist tech policy and technological innovation, have women lead, and for us to not be afraid to say, we'd actually like a fully woman-led team on this because it's healthcare, because it's women's experiences, women's bodies, and we feel more comfortable having a women-led team. Feminism is understanding that technology and the technology that's being built is male-dominated. And I think it's ready for women, especially women in crisis regions, to start leading.
Thank you for your time, for this conversation. I think it's really inspiring, and I feel identify a lot with your vision and passion. And it's amazing because we were raised very far, but we have like that connection.
Yeah.
It's really nice. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Candela. And the next time it's my turn to interview you because
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan of your work. So
let's do it.
thank you for having me.
Thank you.